Well, good morning. Today is Friday, November the 7th, 2014, here in nice and cold and windy Ohio. Today's podcast, broadcast, whatever you want to call it, is going to be along the lines of kind of a response to the Friendly Atheist Hell House, and a little bit to Jessica Schaub's cult type videos, since these two topics are pretty much in my mind almost the same thing. As far as hell houses, I have had through the 1970s a few Christian churches that I went to that their emphasis was strong proselytization, evangelization, and scaring the shit out of you when it comes to hell and sin and all this other stuff. I was having enough problems emotionally at that time because of the death of a family member, and kind of going around from school to school. There were also behavioral issues that I had as I was growing up, with the particular evangelical churches that I was a part of, and their hell indoctrinations. They would put it so graphically with like art or preaching, and that kind of thing. The fear of God, it was very damaging, very damaging. Definitely put my life in constant fear and trepidation that I'd screw up with this God that lived up in heaven that was supposedly merciful and loving and kind, but because my little horrible sin of telling a little lie or stealing a cookie out of the cookie jar or whatever nailed Jesus to the cross. Because of my sin for these things. It's looking back now. It's you have to realize that I grew up in this. That basically, for my background, that I grew up in a pretty much committed Roman Catholic household. Throughout our time that we were in Roman Catholicism, we were baptized, we had First Communion, we were confirmed. I was an altar boy. No, I didn't get assaulted, thankfully. And attended what they call CCD classes throughout most of my childhood up to about the sophomore year of high school. We moved to Arizona when I was about 10 years old. But in between those times, from like 5 to 10 years old, we went to various schools, and most of these were these evangelical Christian types. And coming from a Roman Catholic background and going to Roman Catholic services, it was quite shocking between the two different environments, the two different forms of Christianity. At least with Roman Catholicism, they were scaring the shit out of you, but they weren't doing it like this. And we didn't have the graphic multimedia and computers and stage shows and all these other mega church things at this time. These were just small, kind of type mom and pop, average size, few hundred people congregations that these people are speaking to. Most of these people were the same people that came every week or every Wednesday, Their families came, and it was just kind of a small organized event, or a series of events that happened. God always had a few things that Jesus was important, and that we didn't want to go to hell, and that you better tithe, you give to the church, and that was pretty much what most services revolved around. In Roman Catholicism, they covered the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Every few years, they would rotate through each one in their liturgical year. It's from Easter to the summertime to Lent, and Advent, and with those kind of things. Um, so that is almost all my experience with hell. The next time I experienced something along the lines of hell was with some Mary Baxter tapes of Divine Revelation in Hell. And it brought back all those memories and all those preceded um, images in a more complete um, series of tapes. Dang, I don't even remember how many tapes there were, but there were several, with the multiple levels of hell and how she was commissioned by Jesus to show these demons and spirits and all this other stuff that would be sent on the earth, and deceiving people, and how Satan was deceiving people, and all these sinners and this and that and those kind of things. Those were pretty scary tapes in themselves. They ended up in that particular time frame. Now mm, I was in my 20s, the beginning of my 20s when I heard these tapes again. So there had been a 15-year gap between the time that I first heard about these graphic things of hell towards this time, and they still had the same trepidation and anxiety and fear that were generated even when I was a little kid. Though in this particular case, it was kind of an introduction into a cult that was down in California. I happened to have met another soldier um, during this time, and his dad was a preacher down at this church called Mount Zion, Stones of Fire, and it kind of sent me still searching for wanting to be obedient to God's will. I was a chaplain assistant in the Army, in the so spending some time down there and coming back up, it it was kind of a new brainwashing in that term. I ended up spending 9 years in a cult. Um, I got married. We started a school with the Becca program, a video school. So there was intense indoctrination for the kids. That was their primary purpose, was indoctrination of the kids in the first couple of weeks to get them saved and committed to Jesus, and following the Bible and not living a sinner's life, for whatever sin a teenage kid would be, or a little kid. Like I was, not doing homework, lying and cheating, maybe beating up on their brother and sister or whatever, arguing with them. Um, some of the older ones going through puberty or whatever. So that kind of thing. It was a rather. I experienced a lot of cognitive dissonance during that time. things weren't adding up in my mind, but I couldn't figure out why they weren't adding up in my mind. And even though my wife's parents at the time um, never, they kind of left us alone, but they didn't leave us alone. They pressured me a lot to go to school. That they constantly wanted to stay involved in both of our lives, more their daughter's life than anything else. But the it just things weren't adding up, and I couldn't quite figure it out. I had ended up getting in trouble with the apostle of the church because they believed in the apostle, prophet, evangelists, pastors, and teachers. And supposedly he was an apostle with an apostle's anointing to found a church and all this type of deal. And, there was problems with the way people were getting disciplined and excommunicated from the church. I mean, there was excommunication in the Roman Catholic Church, but that was a pretty long, lengthy process, and I never, in 16 years of my time in Roman Catholicism, heard anybody ever get excommunicated, and it seemed like everybody was getting in trouble every few months. There was somebody else being disciplined and not following God's will and outside of his church and will miss his anointing and his calling for um, what God was currently doing on the earth. The So the cognitive dissonance would increase. I had been disciplined myself. My wife kind of ganged up on me with them, to be expected, but she lost respect. That was one of the first places where she lost respect for me. I just remember seeing it on her face, and I basically went back out into secular work. And the people that I worked around, the manager that I worked around, and the other ladies that I worked around, because I was in an office environment, I watched their life and things that they would go through, and it would be so drastically different than what was happening in my microcosm of our world, and it was just things would be more peaceable. I mean, not saying there wasn't hassles with people and just people living life, but things kind of flowed, and you try not to get too upset about things. And one of the things that my manager was for customer service was that there would be people who would come in and they would be like genuinely upset about the lack of service with the product that we were distributing. And she would actually be able to calm them down and help them within minutes of them coming into the office. And the church leader that I had seemed to have nothing but hassles and conflicts with everybody, and it just didn't add up. And part of that was growing up. My parents had their conflicts, and they still do it to this day, and it unnerves me. They have these yelling matches and arguments, and they call that love. And to me, that's not love. I really don't even believe in love, but that's a whole other story. The Just how much more calm people dealt with things. It was soothing in that aspect. It didn't seem that people were so bad and so scary and so um, uh, horrible. there was a different flair on it. It's hard to describe. Um, but that ended up in those few years working for them, watching those examples that way, that um, my wife and I fully left. She actually went into secular work again because the school closed down for lack of finances, thankfully. And then we would go back and forth there on that between work, and then we still were attending meetings. It got really, really strange in 1988 towards the close of the year. And we both, after another argument that I had with the church leader, had a major falling out in the sense of that we never went back again. Um, so this, in a short little nutshell, has been my experiences with my own version of Hell House and the damage that it did. Um, I can say now that I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in a heaven. I don't believe in a hell. Do I still have flashbacks once in a while? Some of these things. Yes, I do, but I also don't have the cognitive dissonance that I had before. So it's a little bit easier to go back and observe those thoughts and see where they were really planted, and that those thoughts weren't really mine and they didn't really originate with me. I was indoctrinated with them from a little kid. I didn't have the ability to argue against the things. They were one-sided conversations. It was a full-on indoctrination. So this is Friday, November the 7th, 2014, and I hope you have a great day. This is my video response to Hemant Mehta and Hell Houses and Jessica Schaub with some of her stuff on the Teal Swan and cult information.